Hey, everybody. And once again, I missed when we went live. I'm really good at this, aren't I? I was looking at something else on the side of the screen, and for just that split second, I'm like, oh, are we live? Really? What happened? Anyway, it is Wednesday, October 20th, 2021 at 3 o'clock p.m. or slightly past. And that means it's time for Women in Business. And I'm really, really excited about my guest today, Kathy Cheng from Redwood Classics Apparel. She's the president. She has an amazing bio, which I will now read to you because you should know who she is before we talk to her. Kathy Cheng is the president of WS & Company, one of Canada's leading full-service apparel manufacturers, and the founder of Redwood Classics Apparel, its in-stock apparel line, which provides promotional and retail distributors with garments handcrafted in North America. Kathy's most recent achievements, these are just the most recent, there's like 3 more paragraphs after this one, include being named to Inc. magazine's 100 Female Founders list for 2020, receiving the Canadian Aboriginal and Minority Supplier Council's Special Recognition Award for her philanthropy and inclusive local procurement during the COVID-19 pandemic, receiving the WBE President's Award for her commitment to supplier diversity, and receiving the LGBTQ Plus Ambassador of the Year award. And she was also just recently named to Counselor Magazine's 2021 Power 50. So this is a woman with a lot of accolades going, and she's going to talk with us today about a lot of stuff, but diversity would be one thing. And I'm going to pop her in. Hi, Kathy. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Christine. Thanks for having me. So thrilled and so excited.
Oh, well, I am too, because I have to say, one of the things I want to say right out of the gate here is that I listened to a podcast that you did on anti-Asian racism. And I'm going to put this link up because if you all, and I've been spreading this all over social media too. So if you all have not listened to this yet, you really should, because it's not easy to listen to, I gotta say. There's a lot of emotion and a lot of stuff to unpack out of it, but you really should listen to that. So I wanted to put that out there right away just because I think it's an important thing. But I also brought that up because one of the stories that you told on that podcast was one of the first things that I wanted to talk to you about. And this is what I call the yellow fever story.
Yes, the yellow fever story.
Yes. And I have to say, when I heard this the first time, I wanted to punch that person on your behalf, even though. So just the short version of the story is, if you wouldn't mind.
So the short version of the story is, as as we're fighting for equality, especially gender equality, in the business world, we're still not used to a lot of female leaders and female decision makers. Having said that, I was at a large trade show in a social setting, and I was having I thought, a very professional conversation, although it was in a social setting at a bar. We are allowed to have this type of professional conversations at bars during networking, right? I thought I was having a serious conversation explaining to the other party, who happens to be male and Caucasian, about my business and what we do. We're an apparel supplier. We make everything in Canada, really focusing on quality, quick to market, just-in-time delivery, all of that great stuff. And I would say a few minutes into the conversation, instead of asking me about my business, he pretty much stopped me and was like, "Do you know I have yellow fever?" And for those that may not know what yellow fever is, typically Caucasian men, or not even Caucasian men, just men of different genders, of different ethnicity, that have an attraction to Asian women. And I could be wrong, but some of the origin that I've heard from it is because, especially during the Vietnam War, there's a lot of soldiers that went to Asia, and often the Asian women were the ones who were caretakers and or were nurturing our soldiers.
Right.
And as a result, sometimes Asian women end up getting a little bit, not always, but there's that sexual connotation to it.
Mhm. They get
And
a little bit fetishized.
yeah, yeah, and so it was just it really, you know, I didn't know how to respond. That's number one.
Not surprising.
Um, I just it was a very I mean, and I have to be honest, at the time, at the moment, I don't even think, like, I didn't react. I don't even know how to react. I don't think I did. I was kinda like, "Oh,"
Right.
right? Um, but with all the injustices, and I think 2020, as challenging as that year was, with COVID and just,
Mhm.
I would say the curtains of social injustice was really pulled back, and 2020 and 2021 and continues to be it really kind of started my journey of self-reflection. And so, in the podcast, I shared the story because it was shortly right after the Asian murders in
Mhm.
Georgia. So everything was really fresh. I was also sharing another story whereby Asian racism happened to my, at that point, 8.5-year-old daughter.
I
You know,
remember that story too, yeah.
yeah, so that was also a little story that I shared on the podcast where, as an 8-year-old, being at school, and of course she was oblivious to it, but to have a child, a fellow schoolmate, say to her, "I don't like Chinese people. You gave us all COVID." That was very hard for me as a mother to hear. Um, and the sad part is it didn't bother her. Like, she didn't even know it was anything that was not right. Um, and it came up in basically, like, after it happened, a few days or a day or two after, in conversation. I mean, I did address it with the school.
Mhm.
However, it doesn't make that particular situation an easy situation to have swallowed and to deal with as a parent. And I think just
Oh, no.
anyone, for anyone, quite honestly.
Well, I mean, both those stories, the one about your daughter, what struck me there is that you said she kind of it just rolled off her a little bit. She didn't either understand that it was a slur or it didn't impact her like it did you because you have all this history and she maybe doesn't have as much yet. And maybe not as much understanding either.
Right, and I think that's I mean, I try to be a positive person looking for the
Mhm.
silver lining, and the silver lining in that situation was that she was oblivious to it, and that's a good thing because she didn't see the difference, she didn't really see color. And she
Right.
perhaps I remember even when they were very young, I would ask them, trying to describe what your friends are looking like, and I don't ever recall that they used color, the color of your
Mhm.
skin, until much later on, when I was prompting. I'm trying to find out more. My kids go to an all French school. We're in Ontario and Toronto here, predominantly English, but Canada is officially a bilingual
Mhm.
country. Um, being an immigrant myself, I came to Canada when I was very young, when I was 4 years old. I did not, and my parents, I'm an only child. My parents were your typical immigrant family. So we came from very humble beginnings. My dad used to work 3 jobs. He was a cutter by day, served Chinese food at the local Chinatown
Mhm.
on weekends, and on weeknights, he was delivering pizza, right? And this is an individual that didn't know English either when we first came to Canada. And my mother worked full time as a seamstress, and I would go to school, but I was a latchkey kid at the age of 5. So, I mean, long and short of it is I didn't have anybody to speak English with. And so I
Right.
was in an ESL program, which stands for English as a Second Language.
Mhm.
So as I spoke Cantonese at home as an only child, no one to speak with and practice my English, I would go to school during the day. But I was still in ESL up until grade 6. So, but funny enough, I also went to a school board that started teaching you French at grade 1, where in some school boards in Toronto they start in grade 4. So I was learning dual languages at the same time,
Good
predominantly
grief.
English, but I was also learning French, and at home I would speak Cantonese. The silver lining in all that, though, the silver lining in all that is that by the time I was in grade 6, I'm still in ESL. But they found, and I had moved to a different neighborhood and a different school board, and they found that, oh, perhaps she should try and test for um, taking bilingual French. So it was extended French program whereby starting from grade 7 onwards, you're learning half your education in French. I struggled a bit with
Wow.
that, but I got in. And ever since I did that, I've said to my husband, when we have kids, I like to put them in French school because I think the more languages you know,
Mm,
the more culture you know, the more open-minded as an individual you can be. And that's all we can do as parents, right? It's
right.
just lay the foundation for your kids to explore the world and hopefully be open-minded and accept more perspectives.
Well, and I think the younger that you learn languages too, the more the easier it is maybe to pick them up and keep them. Because I
Yeah.
know I tried to learn languages later, and I still try to learn languages, and it's so hard now.
It is, but funny enough, as hard as it is, I myself started taking Mandarin classes, now that we can do on inline person, learning
Mm,
again. I have found over the last little bit, a number of our makers that we're onboarding and staff, their mother tongue happens to be Mandarin versus Cantonese.
mhm.
And so, I would like to be an inclusive leader, and in order to do that, I am now taking um, Mandarin classes. My kids are
Wow.
learning Cantonese, so we go to the same on weekends. We go to the same Chinese school. Mommy also goes to class, and then they go to class. But I think there's a few things that action. I'm a true believer that action speaks more louder than words, and I hope by taking this action, I'm genuine in showing my team members here that I'm trying to be an inclusive leader. And then also another thing I'm going to be able to show my kids is that you're never too old to learn.
Right. Which is, I
Having
think, really important
yeah,
that they know that. But
I hope so.
I just want to circle back to the story about the gentleman at the trade show for a minute, just
Yeah.
because here's the part that really annoyed me about this. Not only were you dealing with sexism, you were dealing with racism on top of it, which is like a double whammy shit sandwich, basically, if you'll excuse the expression. And the part that I kept trying to parse out and I couldn't quite get it was what was going through this guy's mind that he thought that was an acceptable way to behave.
I mean, not to justify the thought process at the time. This was a good few years ago. I think
Right.
that's why when we as society talk about these issues and address them, part of what we're doing is actually educating. You don't know what you don't know.
This
I'm
is
not
true.
excusing it, but that's why these difficult and hard conversations are so important for us to have because
Okay.
I can't blame someone if they don't know better. And I mean, I look back again, even myself, it's the story is always it's been with me. It didn't sit well with me when it first happened. And I
Right.
remember I shared it with a girlfriend of mine and because it just didn't feel well, right? I shared it with her, I would say, I think the night of or the day right after. I'm like, this happened. Like, is it like doesn't really feel right? And she said, you know what, Kathy, you're right. It wasn't appropriate,
Right.
but it was also kind of the sexism is kind of the norm in the industry,
Oh, which, yeah, which is
right?
sad, but
Which is
yeah.
sad. So I guess where I'm going with this is we don't know what we don't know. Now that we do know, and now that we've pulled back the curtains, and it's like reconciliation and all of these topics and
Mm.
issues, if we talk about it, we're empowering each other to know more and to be
Which
more.
yeah, which I think is there's also the added benefit that, maybe some of the people who would do these things will see these conversations and see themselves and, like you said, maybe learn to do better next time, we hope.
Yeah,
please.
I mean, I'm the first to admit, I'm sure that there are things that I screw up on. And at times, sometimes we may offend people and we don't even realize it. But,
Mhm.
if we're told better, I would know. Like an example would be, you know, um, a Jewish friend of mine. Um, he eats kosher food. And so I would ask, is the food koshered? But it's not koshered. It's a
Mhm.
style, right? The food and the way it's being handled. And so I appreciated that he called me out, and I don't even think he called me out. He just knew
Just
that I would.
explained it.
Yeah, he just explained it. And that's another lesson I think I've learned over the years too. I'm pretty passionate about diversity, and I've been for a number of years. It's not just because it's the hot topic right now, which happens to be a
Right.
hot topic. Um, and I think I used to be a lot more aggressive in the manner in which I would express myself and or um, retell stories of injustices. And because I've experienced it myself, so I think I really internalized a lot of it.
Mhm.
But if anything, over the years, especially the last couple of years, I've learned that the the more inclusive we can be in kind of putting yourself in the other shoe, and that's why I'm able to say, "You don't know what you don't know." And as angry as I was with the child that said that to my child about, giving
Mhm.
everyone COVID, a big part of me was like, "I can't get upset at the child." That child learned that from some
Yeah.
more than likely at home, if not at school.
Yeah.
So, it's
And
the
it's
environment that we provide and we put ourselves in.
well, let me ask you this because I know this is something that I deal with certain topics. Is there ever a point where you're just like, man, educating all these people is just really exhausting?
Um, to say no would be untruthful. I would say
Okay,
it's a lie,
fair enough.
and I wouldn't say I'm tired more than it is of when can we do more together?
Yeah.
And it
Okay.
isn't necessarily always with this topic. I mean, if you take that mindset, it applies to your home life too. Let it be with your home partner. Let it be like for me, it'd
Right.
be my husband. My life partner is my husband. And there are times where ugh, I'm tired. I come home and I'm like, oh my God, really? Like, I wish I didn't have to clean this up. And then I
Yeah.
think about how about all the great things that other people are doing. And so the other thing that I've learned, I've really worked hard, and I'll continue to work hard on self reflection and really um, being mindful of others. Um, and another thing that I've learned over COVID is that self awareness is a huge superpower. I know it sounds silly, but we're just like, I'm discovering it now. I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm like so middle aged, and this lady's finally figuring out that, oh, self awareness is important. It is, right?
Oh, that makes me laugh. But yeah,
So
yeah.
going back to your question on whether or not I get tired, no. I I do get tired, but it's not necessarily because of that topic. I think every person will have peaks and valleys. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm tired from COVID, arguably, but then I'm
Mhm.
re-energized because things are starting to look up, things are getting better. We're gonna start seeing people in person. We're finally out of our lockdown. I mean, we still have COVID restrictions here up in Toronto, but relative to before, no.
Yeah.
So, looking for the silver lining, I guess, is the long-winded answer.
Well, and I think there also is something to be said, at least I've experienced this, when you do this work, whether it's about diversity or, sexual abuse or mental health or whatever it is, and you do see people who actually get it and who learn something, that's the energizing part for me, I think, is having these discussions and
100%.
hoping that maybe there's one little nugget that comes out of this that hits someone who really needed to have that
Yeah.
particular bit. And that's what, on the days when I'm like, this is never going to change, everybody sucks. That's the thing that I go, okay, well, I'll give it one more shot and see if this is going to make a difference this time.
But
So,
Christine, I have to thank you and commend you for continuing to march on, because it does take individuals such as yourself. It takes a village,
it
right?
does.
It takes a village, and I think everyone has their strengths and they have their weaknesses. But if we continue to surround ourselves with those who share similar values and we're working towards the same goal, your weakness may be my strength. You know,
Right.
your strength may be my weakness. And together as a village, we're going to move the mandate forward.
Well, and that's one of the things that I love, is that exactly what you just said. I can do my bit, and my bit is maybe this, and then your bit is something else. And if we put all our bits together, not in a weird way, but in like a positive way, then we're all going to do something great. And that, I think you have to be enough of a utopian thinker to believe that can happen,
Yes,
to
it is
make this
utopian.
kind of stuff be something that you can do, because there are bits of it that are hard. Sometimes there are stories that are hard, there are events that are, I mean, those poor women who were killed, I mean, that was a horrible thing. And you don't have to have been an Asian to feel how horrible that was, but
Yeah.
if you were, I'm sure it was 10 times worse, because these are people who look like you.
It's the trigger, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And,
yeah.
and we all internalize to some degree. But the internalizing is also what motivates and makes you live and think utopian.
I think
Because we
that's
all
true.
want to work towards and live in utopia.
I think that's true. And I also think, for me at least, there's also if I talk about the things that happen to me and make people understand, maybe I can save other people. Not save, because I don't like that word, but maybe I can prevent other people from having the same experiences. So if I can educate, maybe that helps. I don't know.
And I think that's the power of storytelling and story sharing, I should say. Right? Maybe, I don't know about preventing or whatever, but at least we can help each other manage each other's expectations
I
on
think that's a good point.
potential feelings. You may not feel it, but these could come out. You may not react this way. However, you could react this way. And I think just everything else in life, if we can manage expectations, even, manage expectations of feelings, what to expect, then we're making the other person feel safer. We're making
Oh,
ourselves.
and I think, yeah, definitely. And I want to go into another. This is one that I have to say, when I was getting ready to do this, I kept flashing back to when we had our initial conversation to kind of meet and greet. And I made that stupid joke about I'm the whitest white girl ever. And I was like, oh my God, why did you say that? You're such a dork. And part of me was like, oh, she knows I didn't mean anything by that.
Yeah.
But there, I think, is this fear for a lot of people that they're afraid to say things, either to call out people who are being racist in some way or sexist or whatever it is. And also this fear that the person that you're talking to isn't going to read the intention. They're just maybe going to hear what you're saying. And I don't know. And I talked to another woman who's potentially going to be on the show in a few months. And she said she went to dinner with some people, white people, and she was African American. And the conversation turned to Black Lives Matter. And she ended up in kind of explaining what was happening and defending the program and everything. And she said, I was really glad I was there, but at the same time, I felt like, why is it my job to have to decode all this for you people when I just wanted to have a nice dinner and hang out with some people from this trade show that I was at?
Yeah.
And so I guess where I'm going with this is, I don't even know where I'm going with this, honestly. I guess, how do we navigate that? I mean,
I think everyone has
is
different feelings. I don't think there's a right or wrong way.
okay.
I personally, in my humble opinion, perhaps ask for permission before going into those
Yes.
conversations. I think when you have permission, it really diffuses defense mechanisms, or hopefully it'll minimize negative feelings or connotation, because you're basically being vulnerable. You're asking for permission. And I personally also believe that often, and this is changing, but the real superpower isn't being tough. The superpower is actually being willing to be vulnerable. Because we're in such a society that's always like tough, rough, you can't cry, you can't do this, you can't do that, right? But if we can just humanize, like, you and I are both human beings. What is our basic denominator, right?
Right.
We're just human beings. So
Well, and I think
to
a
give
lot
each
of
other a level
times,
of empathy.
yeah, I think that's, and I think that's the thing, is that sometimes we get so worried about how we're going to be perceived that we don't look at what's really happening, because we're in our own head so much about, I don't want to say that, I don't want to be offensive, I don't want to transgress, I don't want to. So instead of asking the question and just admitting that I don't really know how I should address this,
Yeah.
or what I should say, but this is the thing, or, and honestly, it really did bother me when I said the whitest white girl thing. I
It
was
did.
like,
It
I
rolled
should really say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean anything by that. But
up.
that's more self-deprecating humor on my part, honestly, because
Yeah, I
I
agree.
am the whitest white girl in the world. Good God. But, but I got in my head about it. And then I was like, oh, gee, was I like, especially when we're having a diversity conversation, was that appropriate? Should I not have said that? Does she now think I'm an idiot? What am I doing?
It's great.
And like you said, I could have subverted all of that had I sent you a 2-line email and said, hey, I made this comment and I'm worried about it. Did it bother you?
Hmm.
And we could have avoided the whole thing.
But I think what you're doing now is bringing it up and talking about it. And that's actually really powerful too. Because now it's just opened up another avenue for us to learn from each other some more.
True.
Right? We're sharing more perspectives. And that's really what a lot of this is about. Why do we need to be perfect? I mean, I'm far from perfect. I'm the first to tell
Yeah.
you. My kids will tell you that. My husband will tell you
Well,
that.
and I don't get why we put so much pressure on ourselves to assume that we're always going to understand what someone from a different culture or a different religion or a different country, or whatever the difference is, a different gender, whatever it is, that we're going to automatically know how to navigate their cultural signals, or it's, I know what I know from where I grew up and how I was raised, and some of it I had to unlearn, and I'm still learning.
Yeah.
But you have your cultural touchstones and what and I have mine, and they may not be the same.
It may not be, but that's the thing, right? Like, context is everything.
Right.
So if we ask for permission to get more context, then I believe asking and making comments, in my humble opinion, this is for me, right? Because these are all personal feelings.
Sure.
So part of, I think, as individuals, we need to do is also understand how to interact with other human beings. And these are muscles we all have to develop. But we develop them by having better conversations, by using our voice, by being curious, by wanting to learn, and being open-minded to learn. I mean,
And
I'm
I
the first
think,
to tell you, I am like so not open-minded. I'm really working on this muscle. I didn't realize how close-minded I was until the last few years, it's like the older I get, the the more I age, the more I realize, oh
Mhm.
damn, I'm like really stubborn and really close-minded, right?
Well, I think one of the things that we also need to get a comfort level with is that sometimes we are gonna transgress, and we're gonna have to just take on faith that the other person is going to understand what we were trying to do and help us understand why we didn't do it right.
Mhm.
And I think, again, there's the issue of, does that become a burden if you always have to help people understand your cult? But how else are we ever going to know?
Mhm. That's why I'm saying ask for
So,
permission. For me is
yeah,
if someone asked me for permission, I would be more than happy. I think
right,
maybe that's what the delta is. Let's not assume you have that permission. Let's ask for
right,
permission. And not everyone's going to give you permission because it's like a lot of things in life, it's not a right. Like having a driver's license is not a right. You
right.
know, someone opening the door for you is not a right. I think there's a lot of in our Western society, we have been brought up with so much abundance relative to other
Hmm.
areas of the world where is much less resource availability that we have this sense of entitlement.
Yes.
Let's be honest, like I'm
Oh,
entitled.
yeah,
We
yeah,
are all entitled. However, if you were to put yourself in an area where you didn't have you don't know better because this is an entitlement, then we would make all these assumptions and we would ask for permission and we would respect each other a little bit more.
I like it. I like it. I really do, because I think that there's so many things to navigate, and we need to start asking for permission, and we need to start learning from each other, and we need to start being okay with the fact that some people are going to be like, you know what, I don't have the bandwidth for this today. I can't be the one who helps you with this, and have that be okay too, because I think sometimes we tend to make the person who is in the minority, whether it's, if you're overweight, educating people about fat acceptance,
Yeah.
or if you're a racial minority or a religious minority or whatever, we kind of put all the burden on them to be the educators. And it's like sometimes that's just an expectation that that person's not going to be able to manage for whatever the reason.
Right. And it's asking for permission. May I learn from you? Are you willing to share? You may be
Right,
willing, but do you have the capacity to share?
right,
There's the mental capacity, there's the emotional capacity, there's the physical capacity. So I think by asking for permission, we're not making an assumption of anything because quite honestly, we're not entitled to receive anything.
right. But if you ask and you get an answer that helps you or teaches you, then you've really gained something.
Absolutely. We've all
And
gained
you've also
something, right?
respected the person that was, who was in the minority, whatever that minority was. So there's just a lot of that. I don't know. It's something that I've recently figured out. I grew up in a town in the middle of Michigan called Midland, which was the world headquarters for Dow Chemical. And I had always told the story that, oh, yeah, we had scientists that came from all over the world, and I knew a lot of people. And then I really started thinking about it, and I knew a lot of people from different places in the world, but we were all pretty homogeneous in terms of I didn't really experience their cultures. We were all upper middle class. Our parents were educated. We didn't look the same, but we all kind of were assumed to be the same, if that makes sense. I
Yeah.
wasn't hanging out and learning about, my friend from India, what her culture was like, or having food, or, having the dinner that she had when she was just with her family or whatever it was. And so even though I spent a lot of time with people who were from different places in the world, I didn't really spend time with those cultures
Yeah.
as much. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that was more, I mean, I'm 52. So that was back in the 70s and 80s when maybe there was a little more of you came and you tried to fit in as opposed to, you didn't talk as much about your particular culture or what you did. You tried to assimilate a little more because that was kind of at least in America, that was the message that you were being
That
given.
is, I agree. There's that unspoken expectation,
Right.
right? Whereas now we have permission. I feel like, especially again, going back to 2020, I think it has empowered a number of individuals who felt marginalized to finally use their voice, because as society, we're now saying it's okay for you to use your voice. We were given permission. And I think that's
Yeah.
why I'm going back to the permission part when you ask, like, do you feel tired? Or like, no, because if someone asked me for permission to educate or to share, not necessarily educate, just to share, I'd be like, well, thank you for giving me permission. Because that's something that, yeah, I don't know if I ever shared with you, Christine. The name Redwood Classics, which is our factory's in-house brand, the reason why it's Redwood Classics is because one of the what it stands for is longevity.
Sure.
You find longevity, and redwood trees are actually global. You can find redwood
Mm.
trees everywhere, and they last a long time. So that's a representation of our quality, and the
Mm.
sweatshirt that you buy from us is going to last for a long time, and also multi-generational business. My dad and our business partners, but we've had 3 generations of textiles in our family. My grandfather from my dad's side, who I've never met actually, he passed away very young age, but they were also from textiles. So the textile is a 3 generation. But going back to the origin of the name, one of the reasons the name is Redwood Classics is also because it doesn't sound Chinese.
Yeah.
Right? You got to remember when I first restructured the business with my father and we started Redwood Classics, it was in the middle of fast fashion. And it was, what can you get the fastest, the cheapest? And most of it was coming out of China.
Right.
But our brand is a complete opposite of that. So as immigrants of Chinese descent, I actually wanted to make sure I wasn't associated with China.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I have to own up now. But I'm very ashamed as a Chinese person to even share this story, but I'm learning that this is the story I'm sharing because I didn't feel like I had permission to be Chinese, because society was assuming everybody and anything that came out of China was cheap and cheerful.
Yeah.
So if I started to show my face and started using my voice, then that's an automatic association that I really
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to be part of.
Well, I love that you shared that story because that was actually another thing that you mentioned at the end of the other podcast that I listened to, and it was one of the things that was kind of on my list to bring up if I got a chance, because what that tells me is that you talked the your father started WS and Company in 88.
Yeah.
So you guys have been 33 years in Canada.
Yep. Manufacturing
So,
on Canadian
I
soil
mean,
for
33
generations.
years is a long time.
It is a long
But
time.
what that story tells me, part of what that story is that you were clinging to the Canadian identity, but maybe not necessarily feeling like the Chinese part of you belonged as much. And that's something that I think if you're not an immigrant, you maybe don't have the understanding of. I mean, I don't ever go back to my hometown for a lot of reasons, but I never have not felt, well, actually yes I did. But anyway, um I could go back and I wouldn't feel like I didn't have a place there, I suppose. But I have to wonder. I mean, 33 years you guys have been there. You built a company, you're employing people, you have a history. You lived there since you were 4.
Mhm.
So that's a very telling thing, I think. And I don't, how do you how do you parse that out for yourself? I mean, is that something you're still working on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm absolutely still working on that because and I think that's why I've become so passionate,
Right.
especially after I started finding my voice.
Right.
And the sad part is, and this not isn't necessarily a cultural thing more than it is, I don't know if it's a gender thing or it's a Kathy thing. Um,
Mhm.
Thank you for reading my bio in the beginning, but all of those things, like I have to say, I don't think I even recognized and or I thought I had a voice until others started recognizing me.
And that's such a female thing. It is a lot. I think it's something that I've heard from so many women. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
get
no,
you,
no, no, no. I'm an emotional
but
person.
I think this is it's a powerful thing to talk about because number one, women are told we don't have voices. We're told we're not supposed to speak up. We're told we're not supposed to advocate for ourselves and our ethnicity or our gender or our sexual preference or our whatever it is. And I think that's why it's that much more powerful when people do speak up and tell these stories, and especially when you're women, because there are a lot of women out there that still haven't found their voices yet.
Yeah.
So we're helping them do that.
Well, I'm still discovering my voice. If it, you know,
You know,
it can be,
honestly,
yeah.
me too.
Everyone's finding their own journey, and I think if we can be patient and mindful and kind to those that are trying to find their voice, and maybe those who have found their voice, or helping them amplify their voice. And that's one of the things. Oh, Christina, please, you need to participate in our Women of the Week campaign.
I would love that.
Yeah, our Women
I
of
would
the
love
Week.
that because I've been following those and they've been very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that was the whole purpose of it. So we launched that campaign earlier this year on International Women's Day. So every Wednesday, we're featuring different female voices from different capacities, different
Mm-hmm.
industries, and we're asking them to share one-liners. And the whole purpose of that is just to amplify female voices.
And I
It's
love
not
it.
for brand recognition, is not to sell products. It's just we want to continue to focus on gender equality.
I love it. I mean, I've been following those on LinkedIn and liking them and reading them and I'd love to be part of it definitely.
Yeah.
But I think what I love about that so much is that there are so many ways to get other voices out there, voices that haven't had a platform, you know,
Mhm.
doing stuff like this, doing your Women of the Week campaign, just supporting other women who are putting their stories out there. There's an amazing thing. Oh, I'm trying to remember. Is it Support Women? I'm trying to remember who it is, but there's This Little Girl campaign. Have you seen that on LinkedIn? Where they put up a picture of a little girl and then the
Oh,
woman this
yes.
person is
Yes.
now, and then they tell the story of what they went through to get to where they are.
Yes.
And I love all that stuff because one of the reasons that I think it's so important that we as women start telling our stories is that for so long we couldn't. And the other half of this is that for so long, women who were not white were marginalized even more than white women were. I mean, there's the famous story of in the US when women were advocating for the vote, they jettisoned the platform that would have um, put forward some ideas from mostly African American women at the time because they were afraid that would jeopardize their chance of getting the vote as white women. So they were like, yeah, we're going to put you on the raft and push you offshore because we don't want. And I'm thinking, holy crap, you know, even in the same, when all the women should have been working together for the same goal, we were going, nope, not you. And that's why I think it's so important that especially we all need to be women supporting each other and worry about the other stuff. I not worry about the other stuff or not think about the other stuff, because I think identity is important, but we all need to work together, and we need to amplify the voices that maybe didn't get heard even more, if that's a very inelegant way of putting it. My brain is kind of churning as I'm trying to be articulate. It's not happening.
It's fine.
But you know what I mean. I hope.
I do. And you're absolutely right. I think that's important, that and it's not, I'm going to respectfully disagree a little bit.
Okay.
Where instead of just focusing on women as well, I think we need to educate all genders, binary
True.
or non-binary, like identified or not, because we need to advocate for everyone to speak their own truth, to use their voice. And I personally know, at least in my case, it's easier said than done. But one of the things that I personally believe in is, instead of quantifying the impact, is it a big impact or a small impact? I take it to the point where any impact is better than no impact.
Oh, I'll agree with you there. Yeah.
Right? So,
well, and the thing that I've discovered that has been more of a surprise to me than it should have been, maybe, is that oftentimes there's a long tail impact. What you do a thing here and then something else happens and then something else happens, and maybe you circle back to that thing and then suddenly more people are seeing it. So you never know what seed you're putting out there that's going to grow 6 months from now, maybe. And suddenly you have a pumpkin and you're like, I don't know where this pumpkin came from.
I 100% agree with you, because that last little bit about the Power 50, I'm still in shock that I'm on the list to begin with. And I figured, I'm number 50 for sure. And to land where I landed, I'm still in shock. I'm still in awe. I'm still really confused how I even got on that list. But I think you just nailed it. It's all these seeds that I've been planting for all these years. And let it be timing. It's relevant now. And I hope that we can just expand that impact and continue these conversations. I don't think we need recognition for it. I think it's how do we just make positive changes?
Yeah, and I think honestly that the recognition is nice. I mean, it's always nice when somebody says, hey, I saw something you did and I thought it was really impactful, or it really taught me something, or whatever it is. That's lovely. But honestly, this may never be, I may never have sponsors for this. It may never be anything more than this thing that it is. And that's okay.
Of course it's okay, because we're sharing.
Right. And it is, I know from people I've talked to that what I wanted to do is being done, which is I'm putting stories out there that are impacting people. And that was the whole, honestly, this was my COVID project. I was like, the world looked dark and it looked sad. And I was like, I need to do something positive to put something good out. And this was my thing. So, I don't know. I think in the end, we're all here to try to make the world a better place. And we need to use our voices to do it. And I have to say, even 10 years ago, I would not be even probably 5 years ago, I wouldn't have done this. But I'm like you, I'm learning to use my voice, and I'm learning to advocate for what I think is important. And I'm not scared of it anymore, which is weird, but I like it.
We're empowered.
Yeah. And I think the more of us that do these sorts of things, and the more of us that do panels and do podcasts and write articles or whatever we do and get awards, the more that we're seen, the more that the people coming behind us understand what their possibilities are.
I cannot agree with you any. Like, you're absolutely right. For me personally, it was, I still remember vividly, there was this, I'm still very uncomfortable. I told you, Christine, I was like, can you let me know what we're talking about? I'm so uncomfortable doing this kind of stuff. But I literally used to just physically get sick, like knowing I'm going to be up on stage, whatever it may be. And I remember there's early on, like a few years ago, probably like 7, 8 years ago, I did one of my first like live event. I was on a panel amongst, I would say, an astute crowd. There was like maybe 200 people in the room. And I remember going up there, sharing my story, feeling so like I don't belong. And afterwards, I had a number of female women of color, because at that point there was still not a lot of women of color at these events.
Right.
And we were talking about, and I shared my story, how I felt like I didn't belong. I was on stage at EY Winning Women in Palm Springs, and you had like rock star entrepreneurs of CEOs clapping for you. Meanwhile, I'm like, I don't want to be here. I don't think I belong here. But I remember afterwards they came up and it was that feeling of them asking, and I had a number of them that they're like, will you mentor me? Will you share with me? And I realized, oh my goodness, it's representation matters. Mm-hmm. They're not here to listen to me. They see themselves in me.
Yeah.
They see themselves in me, in their future. Mm-hmm. And so I've taken it on to say, representation matters, and that is what fuels me. I want to make sure that it's just not this generation, future generations, my daughter's generation. I didn't tell you and share that one of my most proudest moments happened earlier this year, early March, where I remember it was International Women's Day, making breakfast for my kids. We do the counter thing, and I was, my kids were asking me about what's International Women's Day, and I kind of explained what it was. And my daughter, the first thing she said, she was like, well, whatever boys can do, girls can do. Right? Like, she didn't even understand the concept of why we even need this day to celebrate. And my son was like, but I don't understand. Like he's still, because he's been brought up in a household that we're very equal.
Right.
There is no boy and girl, where he wore a dress, she wore a dress, she's into pants now and refuses to wear a dress, and that's totally okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized, wow, representation matters. That was really for me, like in a few years, 7, 8 years ago, that one event did it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then what has kind of energized my fuel, especially during COVID, because it's been challenging times.
It has been.
Was having my kids, for them to come out in conversation to know, okay, like, I think I've done an okay job as a parent, like not just me, but my husband and I, and our village around us.
Well, I think that is energizing when you see that. I mean, like I said, I'm 52, so I grew up in a very specific kind of culture, and even when I was coming up, which was I graduated high school in 87. Women, and my mother always worked, and my parents were both educated and they both had good jobs, but I was still fed the message that, you should get married and you needed someone to take care of you and all this kind of stuff. And I was like fiercely independent, and I went, yeah, screw that. That ain't happening. So, I went to school and I did a bunch of stuff, but I always was very shy and very scared of getting up and over the last probably 10, 15 years, I started finding my voice, and now I've really found it, and God help the rest of you, because I ain't shutting up now.
I love it. And now look at you, right? Look at you.
And now look at me. But I mean, even one of the things that I talk about a lot is that I have quite a bit of body dysmorphia, because I used to be quite a bit larger than I am now. And I was brought up being told that women are supposed to be a size 6 and they're supposed to be, you know, pretty and all this stuff, and that I did not fit that mold. I was not that. So I have a lot of things I still have to work through in that. I have issues with being on camera. I have issues with being in front of people. So I fully identify with you going, I used to get up and throw up, you know, because I literally, the first seminar I ever did, the only thing that saved me is there was a podium in the room and I stood in front of the podium and clung to it because my knees were not solid enough to hold me up. But I did it. And then I did the next one, and then I did the next one. And, you know, but this is a long, rambling way of saying that we can all do more than we think we can do.
Oh, yeah.
If we're willing to just sit with sometimes it's going to be hard and sometimes it's going to be scary. And sometimes you are going to be in the bathroom 5 seconds before you go on going, I really hope I don't throw up. But I think the important thing to keep in mind is what you're getting out of it, which is exactly what you were talking about, that eventually we'll have a generation like the one that your daughter and son are in, where they don't think about girls and boys being on different tracks or having different abilities. They don't understand why there's an International Women's Day. You know?
First of all, may I just commend you on your courage?
Oh, thank you.
That is phenomenal. And we can only grow in uncomfortable places.
It's true.
Right?
And I'm not gonna lie, not all of it has been fun. I mean, some of it was really hard. And there are days when I still sit here and look at myself when I'm on camera and go, oh my God, you know, but how I look is not the part of this that matters. It's what I say and how my brain works and the messages that we're getting out there. That's the important thing. So there you go.
And thank you on behalf of others for your courage.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it means a lot. I think the message that I really want to get out there though is that everybody can do this. It might not be fun. It might not be your favorite thing to do, but everybody can do it.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, some people will be better at it than others, but everybody can do it, you know? Well, I mean, I found out that, you know, as crazy as it seems, this nutty personality of mine works for this. So who knew? But anyway, that's way off track. The last thing I want to talk about real quick is I want to put up the banners for WS and Company, which is your parent company. Is that what we would call them?
I would say it's the factory. So Redwood Classics. Yeah, Redwood Classics is owned and operated by the factory.
Okay.
The factory specializes in private label manufacturing for a number of retail and designer brands and streetwear direct-to-consumer brands. Through that, then we've expanded on the front end where, in 2009, when I became my dad's business partner, because we don't have contracts. So it's not like anybody says, oh, I guarantee you X number of dollars. And you got to remember, we're making it in Canada. So that's like making it in California, but even more socialist. So our taxes are very heavy. It's true. Very tax heavy here. But our cost of labor, you know, our cost of goods sold is very high. And when we're competing cents to a dollar to offshore places, that's why I'm a big proponent of encouraging consumers I call it conscious consumption. You know, take a look at the country of origin of the product you're wearing. I would say we celebrate farm to table, right? We celebrate our farmers. We recognize the hard work because there's still farming that happens in North America. And so that whole movement of appreciating what our farmers are doing for us, because we're also ingesting the food. But when was the last time we ever thought about and celebrated maker to skin? People that make your clothes, It's the next closest thing to you other than ingesting it. We're attached to it, right?
That's actually really interesting. I like that.
Maker to skin. When was the last time we ever celebrated maker to skin? And it's because over the years, everything is done offshore.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in North America. Like 30, 40 years ago, it could be your aunt, your neighbor, your uncle, your mom, your grandmother may have had a hand in the shirt you're wearing. Let it be from a knitting mill, let it be from a factory,
Right.
let it be from the washing part or the dyeing part throughout the supply chain. But everything is moved offshore that it's out of sight, out of mind. Like I do a lot of
Right.
factory tours with a number of schools. From a grassroots perspective, I've always volunteered my time to all the fashion schools in Ontario. So we'll host factory tours, and I have young students that come in and they're like, "What? There's people?" Like they think it's, am I pressing a machine and something's gonna pop out? No, it doesn't. But because it's been out of, like, I don't blame them.
They
Because
don't they've never seen it.
makers have been faceless because of the way consumer brands have made us faceless. And so
Well,
I've made a point when we come to market, and thank you for sharing the website for the factory. When you go on that website, the first thing you're going to see is a video. And that
yes.
video isn't please buy from us. That video is telling you why we exist, why we want to be here, and why being a maker is important to us and our family.
Well, and I have to say, I told you before we started this, those videos blew me away. I just sat and watched all of them and went, whoever did this was just so amazing. And I mean, it's what I really loved is you spotlighted the people who were running all the departments and the history they had with your family and your company. And it was just beautiful. And I want to put up the Redwood Classics URL too, because I have to say I really covet one of those promo kitchen shirts that everybody's been showing. Yes, I have FOMO about the promo kitchen shirt.
That's awesome. We should tell Promo Kitchen that, because that's why we kept it limited edition. So this whole Promo Kitchen, for those that do not know, Promo Kitchen is an all volunteer nonprofit organization with two main mandates of educating and mentorship to propel and move our promotional product industry forward. And so we got involved in launching. We donated limited edition swag, and we kept it limited edition, only a certain time. And it's to fundraise for Promo Kitchen. So if you have FOMO, we're gonna let Promo Kitchen know, and it may not be Redwood Classics product, but the next swag that they put out, that's going to be limited edition. We should get it sooner rather than later, because again, it's all going to a good cause.
Definitely. Well, we're now a smidge into bonus time, which happens a lot. So I talk. What can I say? But I really don't want to take up too much more of your time, because you've been so gracious to spend this time with me, and I appreciate it so much.
Oh.
This was a great talk, and I think everybody was just so enamored of what we were saying, because there were a few comments, but we are on in Sweden, by the way.
Oh, okay. I see that.
But I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to pop you out and say goodbye, and we will be done. But thank you. Everybody go check out Redwood Classics, check out WS and Company, and certainly go listen to this podcast, because it's, like I said, not an easy listen, but holy crap, is there a lot to unpack there. So,
Christine, can I just ask you, can you put that up again? I'm going to do a screenshot so I can share it with Promo Kitchen, let them know that the education is being amplified.
Oh, I was so amazed by that podcast. I mean, the level of discussion that was going on there, and the level of emotional openness that was happening. I mean, honestly, you could really feel the pain and the sadness of everybody that was on that show. And it was hard. I mean, but we were talking about empathy earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And that I felt what you guys were feeling. you know, and that I think that makes it even that much more powerful. And it really helped me understand how something that, because you probably didn't know any of those people who were harmed, you probably had no connection to them, but just the fact that they were of the same ethnicity that you were, and that this hate was happening against people who looked like you. I mean, that's awful. So yeah, it was, I don't want to go on because like we'll be here another hour and we shouldn't do that. But
Okay.
definitely
You ready?
something
I'm
that you
gonna take
all,
a screenshot. You ready?
okay,
1, 2,
go
3,
ahead.
proceed.
Here we
There you
go.
go.
Okay. So I'm gonna pop that out, and definitely I may be calling on you in the future because I have some ideas, but we'll just leave that. We'll leave that for now. I'm going to pop you out and say goodbye. And thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Oh, y'all, and my camera just went funny. I don't know what happened. But anyway, thank you all for being here. Next week, Sheila Ryan from Designs by Baby Moon will be with me, and we will be talking about a bunch of fun stuff. Thank you all for joining us today. I will see you next week, and I appreciate your time. Bye, everybody.